We're here today with Colleen Hallett. She's an Epona wisdom facilitator, oracle, Shakti yogini, and women's coach. She helps women and girls reconnect to the power within themselves, unwind socially conditioned narratives, and descend into the bodily wisdom they already possess. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you, Carrie, for having me.
I think the first thing we need to do is unpack this word Epona wisdom, or the phrase Epona wisdom facilitator and the word Epona. I've been researching that. And but I'd like to hear it from you for all of our listeners. Tell them what this Epona wisdom facilitator is.
So that's the kind of umbrella term that I use for all the work that I do with the horses.
Okay.
As part of my work, I do like with people just themselves. And part of the work I do with people and my Epona wisdom herd.
I love it.
Which is my herd of horses.
I love it. I love it. I had to say that first. We're going to get into you and your story and all the personal things, but I wanted to put the horses out there first.
Yes. Well, and they're so grateful to be a part of this too, because I've actually been starting to play around with weaving them into my virtual spaces as well.
Oh, wow.
Because they're just like, woman, we have to get out there. And I was like, okay, at first I was like, I have no idea how to do this, guys. And they were like, no, we're going to do it. It's actually a good thing that you don't know what you're doing, because that means you'll be out of our way.
That's so cool. I'm okay. I can't wait to hear all about this. Where are you? First of all, where are you coming from today?
I live halfway between San Francisco and Sacramento in Northern California.
Okay. Very cool. And I mean, I always like to ask a little bit about your kind of personal story. What brought you into this work?
Yeah. So all of our stories, right? Because they're all spirals and not linear, kind of like our cyclical nature, right? Absolutely. As women, there's always that moment of like, oh, golly gee, where does my story begin in this moment when I'm pulling it down and knitting it together to be shared in a linear format? Does that make sense?
That. Yeah, I love it. And you don't have to go linear with it. You can go in any order you want with your story.
I love to stand in the middle and like weave and knit and pull together to the center. So I end up feeling like I'm in the middle of the spider's web.
Very cool.
So a long, long time ago, little Colleen was this very sensitive creature. And I actually don't have a lot of memories from my childhood. But there's one that resurfaced kind of later in my healing journey of me just sitting with the redwoods in our yard.
Yeah.
And just knowing I was home when I sat with them. Mm-hmm. And as I like started my healing journey, I was like, I've had this feeling of home. How do I find it again?
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, and there was so much healing before that. And that healing was more just waking up in life and being like, what the F is going on here? Yeah. And coming home from work one day and sitting on the edge of my bed and just crying and being like, who am I? Where am I? What even is happening? And going kind of down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out ways to like get through life without falling apart. Mm-hmm. And then eventually realizing that I was fighting the process of letting my life fall apart. Because
trying to keep it together.
Yeah. Everything that I had built wasn't in resonance with like what my spirit wanted and how my spirit wanted to express itself. And so I had gotten really into supplements and like herbs as a way of, you know, like regulating my nervous system. I got like really trauma informed and all of these things. And that was all awesome. But I was still trying to like fit the square peg in the round hole.
Yeah.
And I was that square peg. And it was coming into my womb and coming into my cycle and getting to know like the nature of my body. Yeah. And what it meant to be my body free of like any kind of construct or agenda or story that my mind wanted to tell, but really just honoring her and letting her walk me home. And that kind of brings us to today, along with a whole lot of other mess along the way, like beautiful, delicious, juicy mess, like just being down in the mud and learning to bathe in it and love every moment of
it. That's really powerful. So interestingly, you've kind of framed your cycle and your womb space as I don't know, a guide out of some suffering that it sounds like you were experiencing.
Yeah.
Did you always have this awareness and relationship with your cycle and with your cyclical nature?
Not at all.
Okay.
So I was your like typical crazy teenage girl that like the medical system didn't know what to do with me. So I got like misdiagnosed as bipolar, and like all of these other things, because there was this like awakening that happens when we come into our cyclical nature. And when we don't come into it, like, right, we start our bleed and then we never actually like go into the embodiment of womanhood that's dropping into our system. Like the energy just starts like flying all over the place and making a mess. And you have all of this power coursing through your system and no understanding of like where it's meant to go, how it's meant to be carried. And so I had these moments in high school where I felt like I was fracturing. But again, like that fracturing, anytime we're like falling apart, it's because there's so much in us, around us, that we're taking on, that we're believing about ourselves, that is just wanting to fall away so that we can actually like breathe and become ourselves. So in order to kind of like help with my mental health and all these other things, like I ended up going on birth control and just completely suppressing what it meant to be a woman. And so I was just kind of.
Does that mean, I'm sorry, just to interrupt for a second, does that mean at the time doctors were kind of linking what they saw and understood as like bipolar, whatever behavior, with your hormones? Were they putting like, oh, you
not so much, but there were like other things that were happening too, you know? And what's so funny is nobody linked my cyclical emotional landscape with my cycle. So it was more like I was having cramps, like my womb was like screaming for my attention and my embodiment. And like I couldn't meet her.
And you know, it's such a real thing, man. The medical profession, like, why don't we talk about our cycles and link it to some of the, I don't know if symptoms with air quotes, you know, or let's say some of the experiences that people end up going to their doctors for.
100%. 100%.
That's a lot. So how did you make that link? I mean, it sounds like your womb was kind of like calling to you and started leading the way, but is that how it happened?
Well, I did a really good job of ignoring her for a really long time after that. Like I figured out how to like cope. There was also a lot going on because I do believe like as much as my womb was calling out to me and like putting me through this, like her own initiation in my high school years, there wasn't a safe space in my household to like answer that call, to like step into the embodiment of what it means to be Colleen in human form. Right. And so part of that fracturing was me holding up the facade of who I was that at the time truly was protecting me and holding me. Right. And then kind of like in those like early 20 years to like mid 20s, I just got really lost in the facade and trying to find one that fit better. So I tried on like a lot of different things. And that led me to like, that brought me to this place where I was like kind of starting to bump up against where I wanted to be and that feeling of where I wanted to be. But when you've done so much running from yourself, that like call feels threatening almost. Because there's this who you think you are and this identity that you're holding on to. And that's like your safety blanket. And like I said, like in my teen years, especially like early adulthood, that safety blanket, although it wasn't going to serve my long-term growth, was super important to where I was. And even when you start to hear that call, you have to feel brave enough to like go into it and let go and start to shed. And so it was actually, I got taken off my parents' health insurance. So I didn't have access to birth control. Like there are free options and things like that, but like I didn't go and explore those for whatever reason, probably because my bigger self was creating mental blocks around going through that whole process. And so then it just became this thing I like wasn't on. And there were like two things that really helped my mental health. One was moving away from my parents. When you're struggling with your mental health, get away from the people you're around just in case they're contributing.
That's good wisdom.
And then getting off of birth control, because birth control, even though it was helping with like the physical symptoms, which was really just suffocating my womb and shutting her up, right? It was causing like all these other things where I was just kind of still riding this wave of emotion that like really wanted to come through. And I had grown up in this kind of narrative of we're supposed to be happy all the time. And I had like a lot of emotion.
Like toxic positivity kind of stuff.
Yeah, or just
not
like
your emotions,
how do I make
but
you happy again? Because I don't have space for what you're carrying right now.
Oh yeah. Let's just let's just get this dealt with quickly. And
yeah. And that was why, like, from a young age, I was put in therapy. And like my parents just didn't know what to do as someone who like felt the world so deeply.
Someone who had all the feelings.
Oh my gosh, all the feelings. And I
relate
did,
to that.
Early on, I had like a lot of loss. Like one of the stories that I identified with for a long time was like everything I love dies. Because I'm like obviously an animal lover. I had poodles of pets growing up. Every single one of them, except for one, had tragic deaths.
That's traumatic.
Too soon, too much. Yeah, just kind of like all this stuff. And what I learned last summer, actually, I did a healing where I actually got to like meet my guides on the other side. And it was everyone I had ever lost. And so it was them just needing to like meet me and cross over. So now I carry that story so differently in my system, and with so much gratitude and love for the loss that I experienced. Even
that's
that
beautiful.
space of just like loving what that brought forward in myself, the depth that I experienced myself in.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. There's so much. I'm just kind of like stunned because you're like we need a different word for trigger when it's like positively triggered.
Yeah.
Like a bad trigger. You're triggering certain memories and thoughts in me that I very deeply identify with. So that's an interesting, I've never spoken to anyone about that, like that loss of childhood beloved animals. I have a funny story about, and I'll really try to condense it here because we have so many other things to talk about. But do you remember the Where the Red Fern Grows, that movie?
Oh yes.
Right. So, and the ending is like traumatic, right? Like the dogs die.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was sitting watching that movie. I must have been 6 or 7. And I'm watching it on TV and I'm crying. And my dad comes in the room. I was like, why are you crying? I'm like, the dog's died. And he said, well, stop crying. It could be worse. I was like, no, nothing could be worse. Nothing could. He said, it could be worse. I said, no. And he's like, your dog died. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yes. And you need to stop crying. You need to get up and come outside. All your friends are gathered round. And you need to say goodbye to the dog, Carrie. I'm gonna bury it. Like, Can you imagine? And it's still so clear in my head of having to go out there. All the neighborhood friends were around, the dog's bodies in the back of the trailer in the driveway. And I had to like say some words, you know, before they went and buried the dog. And then like that night, my mom has told me like I was so kind of traumatized that I was like seeing the dog. So what you just said reminded me of that. Like I would see the dog over in the corner and be like, he's there, you know. So yeah. And I always thought it was like my trauma, but maybe it was really a guide. Maybe it was really there, you know. Or who knows?
I believe they are.
Yeah.
We aren't always open to receiving it. And there's like certain animals that I've lost that I can very easily feel the connection to, but they were animals that like I was able to walk with myself through that portal.
Oh, okay.
Rather than ones where, you know, because there's this place you can reach where you can just be your own benevolent guardian angel and hold yourself while you're going through these traumatic or challenging times in life.
Yeah.
And I found those because I was processing the entire experience while it was happening. I found it's much easier for me to connect with them because I don't have so much baggage. I like processed the baggage. There's no baggage to carry because I did the whole thing the whole time when we were, you know, whereas like my animals that I lost in really traumatic ways before I had this ability to like hold myself. Those ones, like I still want to connect with them, but then I'm always like here, but there's all this stuff. And like my horses keep showing me how simple it really is. But of course, we like as humans play on so many levels, right? Where like there's this train of thought over here and this voice inside of us and this train of thought and this voice, and they're like competing with each other, like lean in, no, it could be bad, but there's this memory, but we didn't process that. And does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and like the mind also how it sends us shooting in so many directions.
100%.
Yeah. So then how did you get into the herd and having having a herd and developing this relationship with horses?
I would say that trajectory was walked hand in hand with my own healing journey. And part of what happened was very acutely like my life needed to fall apart. And so last year I actually lost 2 of my herd members. And it was the first one, Wesley, who I lost last year, that actually like he showed me how to walk through death with him. And it was the first time kind of talking about learning to hold yourself in that space. It was the first time where I felt the support within myself, the support of the angels, the support of the earth, the support of like Wesley's spirit as it was starting to like detach from his body. And it's actually him that everything's kind of like in honor of, because I've always been a professional with horses in some capacity, but I could only meet them where I was at. And to my level of highest awareness. And the beautiful thing about horses, and I learned this from Carrie Lake, who also carries horse medicine, is they always meet us at the highest level of our awareness. So on my healing journey, every time my awareness would bump up, they'd be like, okay, girlfriend, big girl panties 10, next level. This is the only level we're meeting you on. So I had to figure out how to keep up.
Wow. And in what ways do you, I mean, when you talk about your relationship with them, you really hear them, you know, it sounds like your herd really communicates with you. What does that look like in real time, if you will?
So what I love about horses is they play on all levels. And this is speaking to horses because just like us, when we have like a lot of unprocessed trauma in our system, we can't show up in our true nature, right? The nature of what it means to be human, free from constructs, right? So horses too. And this was where like we really had to walk together. I had to change my whole relationship with how I related to horses for them to become horses again, you know? So like not keeping them in stalls, not figuring out the way to get them to do what I wanted them to do, but really like restoring their sovereignty and learning to hold space for them to move through whatever trauma they had experienced in their life and release that so that they could get to that other side of just being a horse again.
That's so cool.
And there's like an ebb and a flow to it because like I don't own my own land. So where I keep my horses is dependent on what's available. Yeah. And so one of my horses, Casper, he just moved really close to my home and I found like the perfect place for him. And it was like unlocking this other layer of what it meant for him to be just him. Mm-hmm. And I was just overwhelmed with emotion. So going back to like, they play on all levels, right? There's the physical aspect, the spiritual, the emotional, and the mental. Mm-hmm. And when we're in our true nature, we can access all of those and we can kind of do this dance between our body language, our breath, the sensation, the emotion, and our like connection to like the wider web of creation. And we can be in that space. And they so readily embody it because they don't have an ego. They just see what is. So they're like phenomenal space holders as spiritual teachers because they meet what is true, whether or not we can see it or sense it. And they know what it is that like you need. This is just coming through to share. One of the horses at one of the barns that I work at got hurt yesterday and was having a hard time like moving her leg. And she needed to get to the water trough. And we were like on the phone with the vet. We were doing all the things, but she needed to drink water and she was too far away to drink water. And like one of the other horses in the pasture came up behind her and pushed her all the way to the water trough. But not in this, like, I know what's better for you. You need to get like how we would with all of our like social conditioning, right? Like I need to get, but it was just this like firm, loving, you need to move and you can't do it by yourself. So I'm here and I'm going to walk with you. Yeah. And it was so beautiful.
That's really, I saw like a viral video. I don't know if you've seen it. Social media. There was a woman sitting down. It looked like she'd been tending with her horses or something. And then she's sat down for a moment and then was kind of just trying to hold it together. And there were like two horses and one put his like head around to her shoulder and nudged her. Did you see that video? Like nudged her on him, like on his kind of chest. And the other one was just kind of holding space, like in the foreground of the video too, like almost like protecting what was happening. And she just kind of resisted and sat there. And then he just kind of like nudged her a little bit more firmly, nudged her head onto his chest area. And she just broke down crying, like just hysterically crying. Apparently, I guess the story is she was going through a really bad divorce and, and needed that. And the horse felt it. So I just saw that. So I can very much, I have like a visual of horses on it were terrible. Like, oh, how funny that you happened to record yourself crying. So, who knows how that moment was captured, but it was really just at face value, looked like a very powerful and very beautiful connection, unspoken, just, feeling between animal and human,
I love that you just used the word unspoken, because I think the spoken plane, in order to speak to something, it has to be distilled down into a word. Yeah. And that right away kind of dilutes the power of an experience you're having. And so if you're like with another human and you're speaking about what you're going through, you're not really in what you're going through, and you're kind of creating this slit within yourself, and you're not like cheapening, but diluting the experience in order to put it into words. And horses are like these master shamans, and that they can just meet you in that place with no words, but everything is said. And we can learn to do that again as people too, and meet one another in that way, and meet ourselves in that way. And that's this space that like healing happens across like all levels. It's just this like whole quantum experience. And horses are good at being like horses in their nature, like, ooh, something scary, I'm going to spook at it, but they're also really wise in their ability to like occasionally step out of their nature, kind of like people are, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is what it means to be human, but occasionally I'm God.
Yeah.
Right. Like they, like in that moment, that horse, like bringing that woman into him, like that's not typical, like horse nature behavior. Right.
Yeah.
But
It
in
was
that
stunning.
moment, he's like the conduit for that like bigger force that's always holding us and always has our back.
Yeah.
And we can access that, not just with horses, but with like everything, with like a flower or like putting your feet in the dirt. And as we learn to like come into our nature again, the whole world opens up as this like symphony of help and support. It's so magical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking very high level, big concepts. So I'm going to ask you this, because this is a big question. How would you connect the horses with, your obvious connection with nature and the womb wisdom?
Well, horses are womb wisdom.
Okay. Well, there you go.
That's like, as I started
Right.
diving into womb healing, I was like, oh, it's the same thing.
Okay. How so? Tell me about that.
So the first I'll like drop, there's a great book called The Tao of Equus
Okay.
by Linda Kohanov or something like that.
Right.
I highly recommend. And it's Tao, Tao.
Okay.
And then, okay, throwing that in, spiraling back to, so just like our womb teaches us to like be with what is and to follow rather than like push.
Yeah.
Horses ask us to be in right relationship, to be with them in a way where we aren't using our opposable thumbs and our big brain to like figure out how to get them to do the thing they don't want to do. Right. But to really like attune and allow space for them to be them. It's the same as how we learn to attune and allow space for us to be us.
Okay.
So there's this like my favorite quote that I love to use that just is like the umbrella for all of my work. It comes from Lucy Pierce's book, Burning Woman. And it says, power over, not power with. So yeah, there's ways that you can like figure out how to like get around your cycle.
Yeah.
But you're just exerting your power over her. You're not honoring her. You're not allowing space for her to be sovereign and co-create life with you.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that's kind of happened in the horse world, is a microcosmic view of like the whole big world. And so like we have like patriarchal ways of relating to horses where like he's just being bad. Well, no, he's having experience. He's just telling you what it feels like to be him right now. Like children in kindergarten, when they throw a temper tantrum, aren't being bad kids. They're just like, this is what it feels like to be me right now.
Yeah.
Right. And when a horse exhibits bad behavior, we go to like punishing them rather than getting like curious, rather than like, how can I like give you a safe and secure nervous system to regulate to, right? So it's really allowing space for them to lead. And as we allow space for them to lead, they become intrinsically motivated and want to co-create with us.
Wow.
If they feel like it. So you also can't be like, I'm going to do all the woo-woo stuff with my horse, and then they're going to do the things I want, right? Because that's just another way of being power over, right?
Yeah.
You can't be like, I'm going to respect my cycle so that I get the most out of her, right? Like it just breaks down the whole idea. Like, that's not relationship. That's transaction.
Yeah.
Right? That's a transactional way of relating. It's not being in relationship.
Yeah. I really, again, you're blowing my mind with this, because I'm seeing the whole parallel of the patriarchy and like what it's done to us women and our cyclical nature, and then like horses, and like how few, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but how few wild horses there are now. And then, like you said, yeah, there's like these patriarchal systems for horses. I mean, you think horses, you think horse training, you think
Yeah.
the gear, you think it's like a strict sport or whatever activity, if you will, and furthermore extremely privileged as well, so um that's, I've never like kind of evaluated it from the perspective of the horse, right, and
Yeah.
their experience as an animal, as a being. So yeah, I
And
can.
it's interesting learning to come into relationship, because you just spoke to like patriarchy. They reflect to us the patriarchy that we've internalized. Because even though I'm a woman and even though I'm a womb healer, it doesn't mean that I'm not completely encoded and enmeshed with patriarchy.
Yeah.
This is the soil that I grew up in, the culture that I'm surrounded with, right? And so I can't see those places in myself unless I kind of get like called out on them. And that's what my horses have like really pushed me along, pulled me along lovingly, firmly on my healing journey, because they were like, no, you're going to meet us higher.
Yeah.
And it can be really frustrating to like not be able to get something to do what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
But
something
that's
huge.
just me being patriarchal.
Yeah.
Right. That's my
So it's like a
own
constant
embodied patriarchy.
challenge to yourself.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you do know that. I mean, it does seem there is some general knowledge, like, and like I said, I mean, I've like been on a horse maybe 2 to 3 times in my entire life. So I was not raised around horses or anything, but even I've always kind of known, I think people know, like when it comes to like riding a horse, in order to get them to really even take you along, like you've got to be in some kind of relationship with them. They won't just do it if they kind of don't like you, right? You can't
Yeah.
force a horse
Yeah.
to do what they don't want to do. Like there is that that knowledge out there. And I guess, yeah, from the perspective of someone that's around horses a lot, or even a horse trainer or whatever, like it must be, yeah, incredibly confronting at times, that whole
Yes.
thing. Sounds like, and it sounds like you meet the confrontation with, hey, let me check myself, let me expand more, let me evolve more, and move away from this strictness or whatever, this control dynamic with this being a little bit
Yeah.
more. Yeah. So
Yeah.
is that the way, because my understanding is, you facilitate this work for other women as well with your
Yeah.
herd. So is that what's in the teaching, or in a part of what's in the lesson there of?
It's really more like a sandbox, and then just like coming into the space and seeing what the horses want to do with it. So I do like training, but not in like a traditional way. It's like every now and then one of my students will be like, who else does what you do? And I'm like, nobody. I'm like,
Nice.
that's like asking someone who else is just like you. I'm like,
Yeah.
everything that we bring forward, especially when it's like birthed through us, when we're like, as women, we're such creatrixes, right?
Yeah.
No one's gonna do it the way you do it, right? And so I do have people, and I do have students that work with me who do compete. And it adds this like whole other level of how do we create space for the horse to be the horse?
Yeah.
And for us to follow. And so in order for them to lead and us to follow, right? So like in masculine, feminine, not male, female, but masculine, feminine energetics, the feminine leads, masculine follows or holds the space, holds the awareness, right? And so when we're working with horses, oftentimes they're asking us to step into right relationship with our own masculine and follow, respond, listen, hold space. And so if they don't want to do the thing, there's no way to, in right relationship, get them to do it. If you're not doing in right relationship, there are a million ways to manipulate people and energy, right?
Yeah.
Same with horses. There's a million ways to get them to do what you don't want them, or what they don't want to do. With the way that we relate to horses, the way that I relate to horses in the space that I hold is I don't allow space for people to show up in their own internalized patriarchy and put that on the horse.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah. And
Wow.
so like, I just love meeting people where they're at. So I have people that have no interest in ever learning how to ride or do anything, but they want horse medicine.
Mm,
Right. And so that can be as simple as like learning to sit with the horse, listen to the horse, read their body language, their energy, like where their mental state is at, where their spiritual self is at, right? Working across all four planes. And then each horse, just like each person, you can like meet a womb healer, right?
yeah.
And each one is going to bring the medicine forward a little differently based on their own embodied codex. And it'll interact with you a little bit differently. So each horse carries their own medicine.
Yeah. Of
Some love
course.
to teach like the stillness and the pause. Some love to be like mama bears and create like a safe space for you to figure out what it means to be you.
Wow.
Some see where you're at and won't settle for anything less. Um, it's just really interesting. And then there's this other thing, like, so if you are learning how to ride a horse, there are right ways and wrong ways to do it. Like there are ways that you can carry yourself on a horse that makes their job harder, right? Like if you're off balance, it's like pushing a wheelbarrow, right? If you have a heavy load on one half of the wheelbarrow, the person pushing the wheelbarrow is going to have to strain to keep their balance, keep the wheelbarrow balanced. If you're riding a horse and you're like all lopsided, that horse has to compensate for that shift in your weight. So it's not that they care how we show up and they're like, you're wrong, you're sitting on me wrong, right? But they'll definitely show you the resistance that it creates in their body. This is what it feels like to be me right now. Will you do that? And that's really powerful for people because we're so used to being told how we need to show up because there's a right way and a wrong way rather than, no, this just works best for the thing you're trying to create. And this doesn't. You can go around on your horse crooked. They'll tell you if that works for them or not. And instead of being like, he is not going, I need to get like a stick or a crop or a spur, right? Like, okay, what here is blocking the flow? What here is creating resistance? What here is making my horse say, this is what it feels like to be me right now. And again, without the agenda of, I really need you to go, so I'm going to figure it out. Because as soon as you have agenda, they're really good at feeling that and being like, especially when they themselves start waking up and getting more in tune with their true nature, they're like, yeah, no, that doesn't work for me. I don't do things because I was told to.
Well, so does that, I mean, just kind of a little functional question, does that mean that there's a time when, you go to ride a horse or you're maybe training someone on how to ride the horses and the horse just doesn't want to do it? And then is there a stepping away? Like, well, we're going to stop.
Yep. We just follow the horse. So if we're doing a riding lesson, and I say in quotation marks, and that's why I've kind of switched to like, I have my Epona wisdom sessions, which are very focused on more the spiritual connection of ourselves in the presence of horses, and then horse kinship, which is allowing horse to lead the experience. And I do teach like riding lessons and things like that. But if my horse is going to the arena to teach a lesson and he stops halfway there, we don't try to figure out how to make him go. We just sit there. We tune into ourselves because we can't control how someone else can show up. We can notice where we're at today. And I have one horse, Quincy, he's very good at teaching the power of presence. And so if you're like trying to get to the arena, if you're like still thinking about where you need to be and what happened before, and you're like not actually here, he just stops until all of you is here.
Gosh,
that can be challenging. A lot of people
sounds
like
intimidating.
practice presence, but there's still a part of them running on in the background. Right? And horses being so perceptive and so attuned to energy, he knows if 0.5% of you is still running around somewhere else, and he's gonna sit there and do nothing. And then once you get all the way there, all the way in yourself, you can ask him if he wants to walk. And sometimes he'll be like, nah, I'm good. But most of the time he's like, yeah, let's go to, because like he's like, you're here. There's something to meet. I can't meet you when you're not here. I can't receive you when you're not here.
Yeah. So it's kind of intimidating. It sounds like you better come correct.
But
when
also like the
horses.
only reason why you need to come correct is if you want to extract something from the experience that is your own story of what you want from the experience, right? Otherwise, you can just show up and be you and just be in the unfolding of what is. Right?
Yeah. That's so philosophical.
Versus like, they're so simple. Yeah. But when we try to put it into words, it sounds very like, I always think of them as being like cosmic and very earthly, because they are so grounded. Their medicine is so here and now, but there are these like wider playing fields that they're pulling from.
Yeah.
That for us, we're like, whoa, that's really big, but that's only because we're so separated from what it means to step out of agenda and just be with what is.
Yeah.
Just allow the unfolding. And then as we learn to allow that unfolding, we get to co-create with the universe. That
sounds like good medicine for like everyone, you know, in this modern day times. That sounds like a real good medicine.
I think that's why my herd was like, we need to take this online, woman.
Yeah. So, well, how are you doing that? Can you tell me about that? Like, what is, you said you're not even sure how to do it and they're leading the way. So what does that look like?
We already did our practice run.
Okay.
So I invited some women and clients that I already have, and I was like, can you guys just go on a call with me? And just because my system does best by jumping into something and feeling it out rather than like creating it, right? Like we have this like kind of reverse of the masculine structure. We create the structure and then we let the feminine flow. It's like, no, sometimes you jump in the pool and you figure out where you need a ladder to get out, right? Like, so I had a bunch of women that I already work with that are familiar with my medicine to like come on to a call with me virtually. Okay. And we did like a little grounding. And then we did a guided meditation to just connect with the horses that wanted to come through from the herd. And so 2 of them presented themselves. And we're like, these are the ones that want to work with them. And I let everyone know, like, if 1 shows up, that's fine. If 2 shows up, that's fine. Like whoever, you know, just let the space be what it is. And so they did kind of this like guided meditation to connect with the spirit of whichever horse was showing up for them. And then just allowed space for everybody to receive whatever messages came through. And then we were like little bees. We brought all the goodness back to the hive, back to the group, and we all shared what had come through for each of us. Because horse wisdom, it can be very pointed to you, but it's also, if you need it, chances are someone else needs it too. That's why like sharing stories and talking about what we've been through is so healing, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, I've been doing like virtual circles for a while, and I always feel like I need like at least an hour and a half to 2 hours to like really allow space for like the medicine to come through. And these horses, like the whole thing was over and done within an hour.
Wow.
And it was like 5 times what I would bring through.
That sounds so cool. And it was on, so did you have a camera on them kind of thing, or was?
No, I just showed everybody a photo of the horse. Okay. So they like knew who it was so that they can connect to that horse. And this is where we have to allow space for like our judgment and our mind to turn like all the way down. Okay. Because things come through differently for everybody. So it was more of like a telepathic connection with them.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the women did speak to that. They were like, I know you said like the horse appears on the hillside, but for me, there was a gate that I had to walk through, you know? And it's like, oh, practice your own discernment. Like if you're seeing a gate, it doesn't matter what I'm saying. Yeah. Your spirit and the horse's spirit are creating it. I'm just holding the worldly container that tells your brain we're doing a thing right now.
Yeah. And they knew the horses?
Only one of the women on the call knew the horses in person. Everybody else didn't. And it was really cool because the woman who like saw the gate, she was like, there were 2 horses on the other side of the gate, and one was Quincy. And this other one was this other horse. And he told me it was like Maui or Malibu or something like that. It was a big red horse. And Quincy told me like, this is my friend and we're both going to work with you today. And then when she like brought that back to the circle, she was like, so there was this horse, Maui. I was like, oh my God, Maui. That's one of my other horses. Like she had no idea, but Quincy brought Maui to the circle. And they both wrapped their necks around her body in non-ordinary reality and held her and delivered all of these other beautiful gushy things that I'm going to just keep bundled up in our like little circle that we held. But I mean, we were like weeping, sharing what had come through for us and like weeping as the other women were sharing.
That sounds very powerful.
All just so simple.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Thank you for getting into the details of it. And because I'm sure, I mean, that's a great way for anyone that's listening that would maybe like to get deeper into this or work with you or, whatever, to keep that in mind, that this is something that's available and out there for them to do. So have you ever thought about taking a camera out, like going live with the horses, or would that be too performative?
One of my locations does not have cell reception or Wi-Fi or anything.
Of course, right? Yeah. I can see that.
So that's where I'm like really excited that my horse Casper just moved to a new location, because where he is, I've been like testing the cell reception there, and it seems good enough that I could maybe try like doing a live or something with him.
Yeah. It could, I mean, remember when, I don't know if it was like maybe a giraffe was having a child and they live streamed it from like a zoo, which already, okay, it's a zoo, like sad, not the best, but like people became, I mean, it went viral to the point people became like so obsessed with checking in with this live stream of the giraffe, and it turned into this thing that was much bigger than anyone thought it would be in terms of people's need to go back and to see and to watch and to not just to watch a birth, but just to be a part of it. I don't know, that connection in real time, that live stream on such a mystical animal. So I could see that being a thing with the horses as well. Yes.
I don't have any that are be giving birth anytime soon.
Yeah, no, not the birth,
but something juicy and fun will definitely be coming forward. I'm currently in the letting go and receiving phase.
Okay.
Of the whole project. So the horses are doing all the work. Wesley, who passed away last year, he's like the head. He's the one who bridges and does all the things. Like he's, it's just really cool. And I don't want to cheapen it by trying to put it into words. So I'm just going to let my glow speak for itself.
Yeah. It sounds like you're building something really beautiful and trying to help people and pull them in. I mean, I've learned so much just from talking to you in less than an hour about this subject. So I can only imagine. Yeah, just I don't know. I'm really impressed. I'm really kind of dumbstruck about it all. So another thing I noticed on your Instagram page, I went there and was kind of looking at some of the content that you're putting out there in the world, some of the messages that you're putting out. And I did see a huge connection with nature. And I thought, oh, well, today is, autumn equinox, it's Mabon. And so it's kind of appropriate to be recording this podcast on this date or on this particular day. So happy Mabon to you and anyone that's listening. Can you tell us a little bit about your connection with nature and how you weave that into, I feel like we've gotten really into the womb space and the horses. And so where does the nature come in for you? Because I even saw you talking about like having a lesson from a leaf. I thought, oh, that's so sweet. Like, that's so cool. So it seems to be a big part of your energy. So yeah.
Yeah. You know how like some people, it's very like cool to be like, I'm a star seed and like I came to earth from these other things. Like I've always been on earth.
Yeah.
I've been either in the light realms or here.
Yeah.
I have a huge love affair with this reality and everything that she brings forward, because she mirrors not just what it means to be human, right? She has her seasons. You witness like, and we frame it in such a, I even want to say like, it's not a human way, because our human nature understands death and destruction. It's the faulty filters we've put on our minds through the culture that we've been raised through, that thinks that it's like horrible when something dies, or I was like, I can't watch nature documentaries anymore because it's like the lion, like it's just all patriarchy. It's the lion conquering the gazelle. It's it's the death and starvation. Like, and it's just, and I get it. It's entertainment, but it doesn't carry like the wisdom of what like these animals and these leaves and these plants and like this whole web of creation is knitting together. And that there's this like overwhelming love that the earth has for us, even beyond the suffering. Like, we chose to incarnate here because we want to learn from her. And we've gotten so separated from her that it's hard for her to talk to us.
Yeah.
So like, and this is where like, it really does come into that like womb wisdom, because like the womb is so connected to the earth and the cosmos, right? Like the womb holds like the cyclical nature of like all this stuff really does happen. Then there's also an energy to everything that's happening. There's like the physical experience of having a womb and having a cyclical nature, right? But then there's the like metaphysical aspect of having it and the other like layers that it plays on, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like as we come into that relationship, we can start to hear the things that are trying to talk to us, and are like, especially earlier on, as I was like coming back to my connection to the earth, I was always like, ooh, a butterfly just went by. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But if it's not all about me, and we're all just co-creating, then like, just receive the butterfly for the medicine of it being a butterfly. And if something comes through, great. But otherwise, just like, oh my God, thank you for like gracing me with your presence.
Yeah.
And I feel like relationship, when we're learning to build relationship, starting at the place of just gratitude for the other's existence, not gratitude for what it's given us, but just gratitude for like, I see this plant, it's a cool color. Have gratitude for like the ability to experience that color. And the more we like drop in, the more she just like wants to be there meeting us. And when you're like in that like celebration, I don't know if it's like, because you know how like when you it's like a thing, if you buy a car, all of a sudden you see that car everywhere. So I'm not sure if like the more you get in touch with nature, now you just see her everywhere, or if she really, like she was there all along, or if she really is rising up to meet you, but it doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
It's just your brain that would really like, that'd be cool to know, but there's no way to know.
Yeah.
So just like get lost in the bliss of it, right? Just get lost in like, I feel like it just starts with finding the things in nature that you like enjoy.
Yeah.
And then starting to bump up against like, I'm neurodivergent. So growing up, like textures and things were like really challenging. But I had this desire, I wanted to get comfortable with discomfort a couple years ago. And I did that through like just very baby steps, starting to take cold showers. I've never taken like a full-on cold shower, right? Like I don't have to do that to receive the medicine. It's just for my system, how much helps me get to where I want to be. And getting to that point where all of a sudden I was almost craving that discomfort, because that discomfort was high sensation. High sensation is, whether it's pleasure or discomfort, the only difference is the story your mind tells you about it, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the day I went to like the beach in like Northern California, the ocean's cold. The day I actually got fully in her for the first time, like I swear we were like singing and dancing together, and like, cause I wasn't holding any of me back. I wasn't judging the experience. I wasn't like, this water's too cold, the weather's not right for right? Like all of these judgments we bring in get in the way of just receiving and being in that space. I was so elated. And then when I got to the car, my feet were like all sandy and gross. And like, that's just one of those things that in the past, like I wouldn't have wanted to be in that level of discomfort.
Yeah.
And then I like turned to my partner and I was like, watch this. And I put my socks on over my sandy feet, and I put my feet in my shoes, and I was like, I'm doing this discomfort hardcore right now.
That's amazing.
Like, it wasn't uncomfortable because I wasn't telling myself how bad it was. I wasn't protecting myself from it. Like I knew the sand wasn't going to hurt me. We had a relationship. We had a shared space together, and I allowed space for myself to have that shared space instead of thinking it needed to be a different way.
Wow. I feel like you are like psychic, because this whole time I was thinking about asking you about that for guidance on this. One of the reasons I'm so excited about being autumn equinox is because it's the end of the hotter seasons here. I'm in the South, and it's full of bugs and spiders, and I have a hard time coping. And because of that, and because that's normally when people are outside, right? Spring and summer. I always thought there's like something, like I'm not a nature person, right? But then, similar to you, when you go through stuff and you're really deconstructed, like nature can be such a powerful healing, medicine. And recently I learned that actually I'm very much a nature person, but just in the fall and winter.
Yeah.
And in the spring and summer, I gravitate towards a different kind of like beach. I gravitate towards the beach, right? And water. And so it's a different focus. But I will straight up avoid the discomfort of spiders and bugs. And it's ironic because I'm also a writer, and spiders are the omen for writers or whatever. You're supposed to let them live in your house and bring the wisdom. But what you were just saying was like, you were kind of answering my question without me even asking it, of like, maybe I should confront that discomfort or I don't know, allow it to be.
Yeah.
The second time I'm having this conversation today, I spoke to my sister about it this morning, and she's like, but bugs are good too, Carrie. Like it's okay. Like we need those. I was like, yeah, but I don't need them in my mouth.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not like, no, I don't ever want to be around them, or I have to open my mouth and let them fly in. Maybe there's a different approach to that, of just like kind of checking my own way I'm showing up for it, or that own, because like fear of spiders is like a control thing. That's what they say. Like you can't, it's like a little moving fast thing.
But they like say that because in their studies of like this many people, that's what it meant.
Right. Yeah.
So that's like going back to like, just know what it means for you. Cause that was also something like earlier on in my healing journey, I always wanted to know what things meant. So I was always like Googling, but I wasn't like Googling my body. I wasn't like checking with my body, going to the source that actually knows why I have this thing. Right.
I love that. Yeah.
And I even just want to like drop this idea of titration, like just doing like little things. And one way that we like learn to come, like titration is this idea of just doing tiny little amounts. So like if you are severely terrified, this is an analogy I heard from someone else, severely terrified of like spiders, you would print a picture of it off. You'd put it on your desk face down, and you would put 5 pieces of paper on it.
You see,
and then each day you take 1 piece of paper off, but only once your nervous system feels safe enough. Like, right?
Yeah,
like if putting it on your desk is
about
too much, you put it in the other room in a cabinet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so same thing, like for me, like my path towards like getting more comfortable discomfort was cold showers, but that didn't mean like, I was like, I'm just gonna suck, right? Like I was like, I'm gonna like do it. And I'm gonna like play with where I start feeling like this isn't feeling good. and I'll just stay there. I'm not going to push myself to the point where I'm like, this is horrible. Right. Like, I do not want to traumatize my nervous system and my body. Right.
Yeah.
I want to hold and be there for her. And even to this day, like, I go through cycles where I'm like, right now, I don't have the capacity to practice cold showers. Like, I need to go and feel cozy and warm, because that's what my body needs.
Yeah.
That's what she needs to keep being my body and doing good body things and be a very good, safe temple for my spirit to live in. Right.
And you respect that and put that first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, think like, we want this like cracking open, this like, I'm going to like fix myself. Right. But like, then we're just like being internalized patriarchy on ourselves.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with where you're at. You can hate bugs your whole life. Like, your spirit could be like, I want to go to Earth and I want to hate bugs. Like, that's my mission. Like, I just want to hate bugs. I want to go into like, oh, it's so terrible. And I want to have that relationship, right? Like, you can totally, you don't have to, like, no one has to fix or change anything about themselves.
Yeah.
We don't like have to be different than we are. But if we want something different, if we desire something different, then we have to meet ourselves there.
Yeah. And it's also, so again, this is why menstrual cycle awareness is my ultimate medicine, because I'm different. Like, for the most part, you could make a general statement that I am terrified of spiders, but there are some times where I'm like, it's just a spider, whatever, that breaks through.
Yeah.
like the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Hence my cyclical nature, and I own it. Whatever.
I love that.
So, thank you so much for speaking to us today. And I'm going to put everywhere that people can find you in the show notes of this. And I really hope that people do. Your energy is amazing. If people are listening, they need to go watch the video as well. You are absolutely glowing. And this has been a really lovely, lovely conversation. Could you just kind of shout out your Instagram handle, for example, in case someone's not going to go look at the show notes, or wherever it is you want people to connect with you?
Yeah. So my Instagram is at And Gaia Rose, ANDGAIAROSE, And Gaia Rose, because Gaia's rising.
Yeah.
And then I'm still, actually, my website will probably be finished by the time this airs. So my website is ColleenHallett.com. 2 L's, 2 E's, 2 L's, 2 T's.
I love it. Very cool. 2 L's, 2 E's, 2 L's, 2 T's. That is so cool.
All the double letters.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Colleen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carrie, for having me.